It's really important to remember them because now it's easier for us to do things that we want to do or things we like to do.
When you see a woman in uniform, you don't really think much of it anymore. But back then it would have been a shock to see a woman walk down the street in her Air Force uniform or in her aviation suit.
They're the basis, the mountain on which we stand on the top of, right? They're the women that did that inaugural pushing against that glass ceiling, pushing against that closed door, and they opened it for us. And I will never be grateful enough, I think, for what they did.
Vi loved the freedom of flight, to be up above the world and look down at it in all its smallness and forget about the trivia and details that clutter up our lives. When you're in the cockpit, your full attention is on the flight.
Violet Milstead was born on October 17, 1919, and grew up in Toronto, her father a carpenter, and her mother a wool shop owner on Yonge Street. At 15 years old, Vi was pulled out of school to help in the family wool shop. While attending a Toronto high school football game in 1934, Violet Milstead saw a pilot buzz the field. The sight and sound of that one plane gave her a thrill and feeling that she never forgot, so she decided then that she would fly. Once Vi knew that flying was going to be her life, the wool shop became a means to save up money for flying lessons. She attended night classes in flight theory and other aviation-related disciplines. She took her first flying lesson in September 1939 and had her pilot's license before Christmas, and her commercial license followed in the spring. Her instructor made a film titled Learn to Fly, with Vi as the star, suggesting that even girls can learn to fly. When she received her flight instructor test at RCAF Base Trenton in July 1941, Vi began training civilian students and others wanting to join the war at Barker Field in Toronto. She was one of only 5 Canadian women to do so. She taught flying for a time. However, with wartime gas rationing in effect, in November 1942, Vi's job ended. Vi heard of the Air Transport Auxiliary, a British civilian organization set up during the Second World War. The ATA recruited pilots who were considered to be unsuitable for the Royal Air Force by reason of age, fitness, or gender, humorously referred to as ancient and tattered airmen. Vi and her friend and fellow pilot Marion Orr signed up and sailed to England in the spring of 1943. Very few other Canadian women were admitted to the elite but little-known organization. The ATA's contingent of pilots totaled 166 women and 1,152 men. Vi was now a 23-year-old Canadian pilot with unshakable confidence at the controls. The Air Transport Auxiliary desperately needed such pilots assigned to fly new aircraft off factory lines to military sites in England and Europe. Vi easily acquired the Class 4 ferrying rating for twin-engine aircraft, earning the rank of first officer. Many of the planes, which would provide vital air support on D-Day, were flown by women such as Vi. Required to fly a variety of different aircraft, the pilots often had to consult ferry pilot notes, which gave crucial information about speeds for flight, including takeoff, climb, cruise, and landing, engine handling, as well as anything else unique to that aircraft type. Luckily, the cockpit controls were pretty similar from one type to another. During her service, Vi logged 600 hours while flying 47 types of airplanes. Vi flew most of the wartime aircraft: de Havilland Mosquitoes, Blenheims, Beaufighters, and Mitchells, including some of the fastest and most powerful Hawker Tempests, Grumman Hellcats, and Spitfires, and many more. Through clear skies, good weather, and bad, the first officer loved her work. The women who flew with the Air Transport Auxiliary blazed a trail doing what no women had done before. Vi resigned her post in 1945. She returned to Toronto and an instructor's job with Levins Brothers Air Services at Barker Field. There she met pilot Arnold Warren, whom she would later marry. Both accomplished pilots, Vi and Arnold moved to Sudbury in 1947. Nickel Belt Airways hired both for duties such as bush flying, charters, and instructing students.
Vi and Arnold worked together as a team, as flying instructors, with their photography business, and with their lives in general. They knew they could count on each other to do what was needed.
Ferrying supplies, equipment, and men on excursions and to mining camps, Vi flew year-round deep into the northern Ontario wilderness. Bush flying involves operations in rough terrain where there are no prepared landing strips or runways. Bush flying was on floats in the summertime and skis in winter. They navigated by the shape and position of the many lakes. She also mastered challenges of unexpected wind currents and weather. Flying Cessna and Fairchild Husky, she was happy flying deep into the bush.
As a bush pilot, Vi used to deal with some rough and ready characters. One of her jobs was to fly firefighters to the scene of the fire. They were often recruited from nearby beer parlors. She told me one story of a fellow who, when he got to the site of the fire, didn't want to get out of the plane. He probably had too much to drink. But in Vi's words, I helped him out with the toe of my boot.
Towards the end of another flight one evening, the weather was closing in and the clouds were getting very low. When Vi was safely home, Arnold said to her, "I can't imagine how you flew over that bridge." To which Vi replied, "I didn't. I flew under it." Although there are competing claims as to who was Canada's first female bush pilot, many insist that Vi was the first. With a downturn at their employer, Vi and Arnold moved on. In 1952, Arnold accepted a job as chief flight instructor in Indonesia, and the pair moved overseas. While Vi was permitted to fly in the country, she was not permitted to instruct. After the 2-year contract ended, Vi and Arnold returned to Canada, finding various jobs, including a time at Orenda Engines at the Avro Aero plant until the aircraft program was canceled. They retired in 1973, settling first in Quebec's Magdalen Islands and later in Colborne, Ontario.
Vi didn't back away from hard physical labor. When she and Arnold built their home in Albion, they didn't have a well drilled. They dug it themselves, with each one taking a turn digging and the other one pulling up and emptying the pail of dirt. When they didn't reach water in the first 15 feet of their first site, they started again, this time digging until they reached water. Fortunately, their homes in the Magdalens and on North Street in Colborne already had wells. Vi took great pleasure in planning her log house on the lake as her final home. Every day she looked out to see what kind of a day it was. Was there a nice, clear, sharp horizon, or did the lake and sky blend into each other? How calm or rough was the water? Would it be a good day to land in front of her house? She cared for all living beings, plants as well as animals. She planted shrubs, berries, and flowers to provide sustenance for birds and butterflies as well as herself. The environment was very important to Vi. When she was 82, she decided she would put in a wind generator and solar panels at her home. So she had someone come to talk to her about doing it. And he said, "I can't do it. People will think I'm taking advantage of you at your age." So she said, "Get your ass over here and do it. I believe in the environment and I know I won't get my investment out of it. Just come and do it. I want to set an example for others."
After many years together, Vi was widowed in 2000. An aviation pioneer, Vi received awards for her years of work. The first Canadian chapter of the 99s honored her with an Amelia Earhart Medallion, and she also received the Rusty Blakely Memorial Award. Vi was made a member of the Order of Canada in the summer of 2004 and a recipient of Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee Award in 2014. Another great honor was her induction into the Canadian Aviation Hall of Fame in 2010. Vi loved people. Each person in Vi's life had a unique role. Each person was special to Vi. Vi continued living with her dog in her beloved log home by Lake Ontario after her husband died. It was situated so that she could see the horizon where the lake meets the sky. With home care nursing support, family, and friends, Vi Milstead remained living at home until her death on June 27, 2014, at her home in Colborne, Ontario.
To celebrate Vi's 85th birthday, I took her flying. And as we were walking out to the plane, I asked her if she'd like to fly in the left seat, the seat of the pilot in command. And she said, "Oh no, I'm just the passenger. I'll sit in the right seat." And she very assertively climbed up on the right wing. As she got up though and climbed into the seat, I pointed out that there was no left door, so I couldn't get into the left-hand seat. She had to move over into it so there'd be room for me in the plane. So fairly, not too reluctantly, she moved over and I climbed in beside her and started up the plane and did the pre-flight checks. And then I asked her if she'd like to do the takeoff. And again, she said, "No, I'm just the passenger. You do it." So we took off, and as we climbed up a bit, I said, "I'd really like to get a picture of something down there. Would you take control for a minute?" So she readily agreed. I never got the controls back until it was time to land. As we were flying up to Muskoka, she kept pointing out this and that and all the places along the way that she hadn't seen from the air for quite some time. She only gave me back the controls when it was time to do the landing, and I'm sure she could have done the landing with no problem at all. After she landed, she looked at me and said, "Well, if I'd had a daughter, you'd have been a good one."
Flying as a vocation is in a class by itself. It affords satisfactions, intangible ones, available in no other line of work, and after the hangar doors are closed, fellowships of the finest and most enduring kind. I seem to be blessed with a temperament which has enabled me to delight in the challenges of flight, to love its freedom, its self-sufficiency, its splendid loneliness, to marvel at the awesome beauty of skyscapes.